Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, even, I should say. And welcome to this Totaljobs webinar. It's morning, I think, where Chris is, as you can see on the screen, in North America. So excuse that. My name's Jon Cooney. I'm the Business Solutions Director here at Totaljobs. And we're here today to bring you a webinar around perfecting your process, maximising your recruitment budget during COVID and beyond. Chris will introduce himself later on, I'm sure. I'll give you a quick intro to him in a minute. But before we get going, some housekeeping I just want to run through for you. Firstly, there's over 135 people on this call today, which is great. Just shows the power of our brand, I think. We want to save questions to the end. We have a panel session where we're introducing Lee Barratt from Ageas. So please use the chat box on your GoToWebinar platform to ask questions, and we'll field those at the end. We've had a couple of questions in already, which is great news. And secondly, we'll be recording this webinar and sending it out as a recording to you all, and the slides as well. So no need to take kind of extensive notes. In terms of the order of play, I'm going to be running you through a quick synopsis of the state of play of the UK recruitment talent acquisition market. We run a lot of research with partners, and we've got our own data assets that we want to bring to the fore, kind of our view on how COVID's affected the UK recently, and looking forward how that's going to play out. I'm then going to hand on to Chris Forman, and we're lucky to have Chris on the call today. Chris is the founder and CEO of Appcast. Appcast is a leading programmatic job distribution platform in the US. And Chris is going to talk through kind of from the US side how COVID's affected the talent acquisition market, but really get into the detail around perfecting your process. And then last but not least, as I said, we've got Lee Barratt joining us from Ageas, one of the UK's largest insurance companies. He's our kind of expert and giving us hands-on experience of how he has implemented an end-to-end recruitment process recently and the benefits and the strategies that he's deployed. So he'll be integral to answering some of your questions as we go on. So hopefully that's all clear and kind of the expectation you're looking for to get out of the next hour or so. Next slide, please. Thanks. I'm not going to look back for too long, but I think we couldn't do this job properly without looking at the impact COVID-19's had on the UK employment landscape. Totaljobs work on a quarterly basis with the British Chambers of Commerce, and we regularly survey over 7,000 employers in the UK to get an estimation of their appetite and sense for their kind of a temperature check on their employment and hiring methodologies. And usually this shows some subtle differences quarter on quarter and market by market, but obviously looking at Q2 this year, we've seen some seismic change and shift in people's and companies' attitudes towards hiring. Overall, the results in the QRO are in line with the kind of key business performance indicators we're seeing across various markets. So from domestic and export sales through to investments, investment marketplaces and cash flow for companies, overall 25% of firms, only 25% of firms attempted to recruit during this period. And 28% of firms actually decreased their workforce during the period too. Go back a slide, please. Sorry. From the 7,000 customers we interviewed, only 12% actually increased their staff during this period. And going forward, 30% of those we interviewed actually see similar levels of decrease in staff or levels of staff turnover during the Q3 of 2020. So I think overall, clearly it's challenging times. Clearly, most businesses are putting a lot of businesses are putting a pause, 75% on hiring, and we don't necessarily see that changing through Q3. However, there are some green shoots which I'll come on to soon, and industry by industry, there's a slightly different picture on that. Next slide, Lauren, thanks. So how's the economy affecting the talent acquisition marketplace in the UK? And I think from my point of view, there's definitely some I don't know, confusion in the market about what's happening and what's going to happen. The Bank of England recently expects a V-shaped recovery in the economy as a whole, but then the ONS figures most recently show that company payrolls fell by nearly 650,000 from March to June. The jobless rate remains similarly unchanged over this period, but surely that's just the furlough piece being in place. In fact, in terms of number of hours worked, we've seen a decline of nearly 17% during the COVID period. That's nearly 180 million work hours lost due to COVID. This is going to have a long-term impact on the economy, but we're not quite sure how or why yet. The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, obviously has put a number of things in place, particularly around jobs, supporting businesses in those segments that are most deeply hurt by COVID. But what does this all mean? What's the truth? I've been working with our data team and insights team at Totaljobs to try and get you a steer on what our data is telling us. Now, here at Totaljobs, we have usually around 180,000 job vacancies live at any one point, and that tells us what the demand for hiring candidates are in the market. Then we have over 20 million individuals making job searches on our platform, so we really understand what the supply is telling us in the UK recruitment market as well. And we've brought that data to the fore with our data and insights team. So the next few slides, I just want to run you through our take on what we see happening at a grassroots level, I guess, in the UK talent acquisition marketplace. And as I alluded to earlier, it's not all bad news. Certainly, there are some sectors performing better than others. This graph here that you can see, I call it the teeth. I don't know what you want to call it, but we can see a sharp decline in number of jobs posted on a daily basis from March through to maybe mid-April. But as you can see, there's been a slow and gradual increase in the number of vacancies posted onto Totaljobs. And certainly between May and June, we've seen actually a seismic 30% increase in jobs posted across all marketplaces. Over the COVID period, the segments that have remained most robust in terms of number of jobs posted, so this is number of employers looking to hire candidates into IT, logistics and social care. Those three segments seem to have been bulletproof through this period, but other segments are coming back online too. And when it becomes even more interesting is when you map the Google search trend data against our Totaljobs job analysis. The grey bars that you can see here are the volume of candidate searches that Google is seeing for jobs on their search engine. As you can see here, the two kind of trend lines are verging apart, i.e. candidates are becoming more active in searching for jobs than there are jobs available in the market. And I think given our experience of the 2008 recovery and other difficult times in the economy that we've seen in our lives, that's usually the case. But this rate is faster than ever. What does that mean to you as an employer? I guess that means there's probably more talent to fish from in the market than you've seen of late. The recruitment or talent acquisition market has definitely flipped from a candidate-led to an employer-led position. But what it really means is if you place a job advert, if you go to market with a new requisition, you're going to be inundated with applications. Okay, there are going to be people applying to jobs they might not normally because the marketplace deems that they need to. So the requirement to have a slick, clean, data-centric, transparent process is now more paramount than ever. And that's where Chris, with his expertise, and Lee will come on to talk to you later about their tricks and tips to try and sound out some of the noise and make sure you're maximising your potentially dwindling recruitment budget over the next 6 to 12 months. But as I said, some of this is really good news. If you're in a workforce management, workforce planning cycle in an industry that's coming back online, and we've seen significant growth in these areas that you can see below, you can really take advantage of that now. You know, even if you don't have the ability to give everybody a job, you can start your talent pipeline, and you know that your segment's going to come back online with gusto at some point. And so the talent pipelining piece, the candidate pipelining piece, becomes more and more front and center, I think, for talent acquisition teams at precise point. Overall, compared to last year, we've seen 4 million more searches in June, year on year, on our platform. That just shows you 14% up year on year in terms of candidate searches we are. So we have a highly active audience. And I know I'm talking about Totaljobs here, but no matter what supplier you use, no matter what route to market you have, the reality is candidates are going to be more open to receiving your job advertising than ever before. So please take advantage of it. So then it leaves us to use our data to try and predict which segments maybe are going to come back online and in which order. And going back a couple of months, you know, on May the 13th, I believe it was, yeah, when the estate agents kind of reopened, we saw a 39% growth in jobs being posted in the property sector. And the same happened in construction from May the 11th when that industry came back online. So who's next? We're starting to see some real green shoots in industries such as retail and hospitality. If we can move to the next slide, please. And customer service too. So much so that, you know, job vacancies in retail grew by 44% on our site over June, which is a significant number, giving us the kind of confidence that market's coming back with gusto. So hopefully that's given you a kind of a sense of how the Totaljobs candidate data can help drive kind of, you know, your talent acquisition strategies as we go forward. We're happy to catch up with you guys offline, no matter what business you operate in, no matter what industry sector you're in. We have this level of insight and data to help drive your strategies. And hopefully it can help underpin some of the noise you're getting either from the government or the national press, or some of the sensationalist stories you're seeing being written about at the moment. That's our mantra with our data and insights team. But what's happening across the pond? What can we learn from our American cousins? Are there some synergies that we can take from the market in the US? And I think, Chris, that's where you're going to start on your piece.
Yeah, thanks, John. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, everybody. And for those that are joining from my neck of the woods, good morning. My name's Chris Forman, and I'm part of the founding team for a company called Appcast. You know, we're part of the Totaljobs family. That's Totaljobs and Stepstone more broadly. We joined that family in last year, almost a year ago, but Appcast itself was founded in 2014. And you know, we're kind of a classic little startup, though sadly we're not that little anymore by my standards. We've got about 160 employees, so I still miss the days when it was 6 or 7 of us in a small 10 by 10 room that smelled like a hockey bag. That's my startup bliss. But what we do is we build software that helps large organizations that buy a lot of job ads to optimize the purchase and delivery of those job ads across the entire, you know, kind of recruitment ecosystem in the United States, in Canada, in the UK, in Germany now. And so, you know, what's interesting is, you know, John was talking about the data set that he and the data team have at Totaljobs, which is super interesting because it represents both the supply and the demand, you know, kind of element of the marketplace. The Appcast data set is a little bit different in that, you know, what we're doing is we really understand a very large percentage of the jobs that are being advertised in a particular market. We understand how job seekers are engaging with those job ads. We understand whether or not people are applying to those job ads, but I don't necessarily know who's doing that. So there's some level of you know, synergy and overlap between the data sets that John's shared and what I'm about to share, but also there's something unique about it. So with that, I mean, again, from a scale standpoint, the data I'm about to share, you know, since we founded the business, we've bought and optimized 2.5 billion job ads, you know, 650 million applications, you know, have been tracked or generated through our platform, you know, billions and billions and billions of job ad clicks. So it's a pretty rich data set, which makes, you know, going through it for a guy like me kind of fun. So a little bit about me. I went to computer camp when I was in 8th grade, which is, you know, when, you know, right before you you go to high school in the United States. So my social life did not recover until I was at least 25. I am the classic computer geek. And for the last 20 years, I've made my career building and starting companies specifically in recruitment technology. So this is all that I've effectively known as a professional. And what that means is, I really am into solving problems for professionals like Lee, and it's been something that I spend a lot of time thinking about. I spend a lot of time talking about it, which may be valuable. Some of you hopefully will take some of that information away. My wife, Angela, and I have 4 kids. We live on a little dairy farm, and so I tend to do some of my good thinking when I'm working in the barn. Angela does believe that most of the talks that I give, because she occasionally comes to listen to them, is metaphorically in line with what I shovel every morning out of the cow stalls. So you just need to take everything with a grain of salt. But with that, let's get into the data. So first off, this is global information that is very much in line with what Jon just said. So what you're seeing here is as a result of the pandemic, effectively starting around March 13th, we saw a massive decrease in advertised jobs across the ecosystem, not specific to any one site, but everywhere, compared to 2019. It hit its nadir in early May, and it's started to recover smartly. Now, what we're going to start to see is a divergence, and we're already starting to see that in markets like Germany and the UK versus what's happening in the micro markets of the United States. So, everyone kind of thinks of an economy as one big thing. And at least in the United States, it isn't. We have lots of little economies that aggregate together. So you can see, kind of economic green shoots in certain parts of our country and not in others based on the prevalence of the pandemic. But in addition to the decrease in job postings, what you also see, and I'm pulling from a similar data set to Jon's, is the fact that seeker engagement, so Lauren, if we could go to the next slide, also decreased. And so it is starting to recover, but it is teeth-like, as Jon mentioned, and it is not anywhere close to where it was to begin with. So if you look at the line, that is Friday the 13th, which is when all of a sudden we saw a material change in the marketplace. To the left of it, you can see, the downs are the weekends, the ups are the weekdays, which is kind of a standard, kind of consumer search engagement in the job space, and it is still way down. So what you have is, in aggregate, you have postings down. In aggregate, you have job search down. If you go to the next slide, that's the macro context that we're in. Now we're starting to get into some of the nifty, kind of Appcast specific data. And what I did was, the first thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to answer this question, because Lee's going to talk about some of his recruiting challenges later in the presentation, but the majority of the people that are on today's call probably are asking the simple question, what does COVID mean to recruiting? And so the question I wanted to answer was, has recruiting become more expensive, like to get a hire in post-COVID or pre-COVID? And the way that the metaphor that I wanted to use to understand whether or not recruiting was getting more expensive was to take a look at what it cost to generate an applicant before COVID, in 2020, and after COVID in 2020. So the way that I got to that was using our giant data set is I looked at apply rates across advertising agencies that manage some of the largest brands in the United States, the UK, and Germany. And so the agencies that you see here are not recruitment agencies in the UK term where, it's a staffing firm. These are organizations that in essence buy job ads or job postings on behalf of employers and manage that transaction. And so, between these 4 agencies that I looked at, we're talking 500 major companies, tens of millions of dollars worth of spend so far this year. And what you see in the blue is across the board for all the cohort of employers that these agencies are managing, the apply rate has gone down. Okay, so what that means is people are clicking on jobs, but applying at a lower rate. And in a couple of cases, a materially lower rate. Like if you look at agency number one, you know, it was 6.6% apply rate before March 13th in 2020, and after March 13th, it's about 5%. I mean, that's a 20-30% drop in apply rate. So what this is saying is that job seekers are out there. Job seekers are engaging with job content, but job seekers are pickier. They are looking at ads and then saying, do I really want to go work here in this environment or not? And what we're seeing is that they're making more specific and you know, kind of more refined decisions. Lauren, if we go to the next slide. All right, so we're seeing apply rates go down. The second thing is that we started to look at what it cost for every time a job seeker looked at a job ad. So we use data that normalized the pay models that people use for job postings. Like, you know, for Indeed, people pay per click. You know, Totaljobs, they pay per posting. With Appcast, our ad model, they pay per apply. So we normalized all that stuff out to just say, how much is it costing to generate a job seeker clicking on a job ad? And what you see in the blue is what it cost before COVID. And across the board, you see it was a little bit more expensive, sometimes, you know, about 10% more expensive. In some cases, not more expensive at all once you account for the margin of error. But in general, blur your eyes, it's a little bit more expensive before COVID than it was after COVID, which kind of makes some sense. When you see a drop in the postings in our marketplace, that means that kind of in essence, it's becoming less competitive. And if it becomes less competitive, you know, good old Adam Smith here, for all you London School of Economics graduates out there, supply and demand. If demand goes down or supply goes down, it has an impact, a downward pressure on pricing. And so that's what we're seeing here. So what does that mean? Prices are going down, but apply rate is going up. Is it more expensive to hire? So Lauren, let's go to the tape. Next slide. Oopsie, we missed one. Can you go back up one? There you go. So what's interesting is, in spite of everything that's going on in terms of COVID, it is becoming more expensive in aggregate to generate an application based on the data set that we have. And it's a big data set than it was before COVID. And this is something that, like, you know, we've been given some webinars about this in the United States, and it's just a head scratcher to a lot of folks, because common sense is, and John, you spoke about this, you know, like the sensationalist headlines. Oh my gosh, you know, everyone's out of work and job postings are down. But the reality that we have as talent acquisition, you know, professionals is that headlines don't fill requisitions. We have to actually look at the real data, and the data says that, you know, job seekers are looking at more jobs, they're applying to fewer. The data says that we are seeing a decrease in what it costs to advertise a job, but it doesn't offset that decrease in application rate. And as a result, to generate an application in aggregate across our entire data set, it's becoming more expensive, which is, you know, completely counterintuitive information for most folks. So if we go to the next slide, Lauren. Now, what does this mean? Absolutely nothing, nothing at all. You cannot, this means nothing to any of you, because, you know, I think it was Winston Churchill that, you know, said, or if you have an accent like mine, some people think it was Mark Twain, that there are three types of lies in the world: lies, damn lies, and statistics. And, you know, for someone with my background, you know, in product and technology, you know, we do a lot of math, and the one thing that I can tell you about averages, which is what I just showed you, is by definition they are not real, and by definition they are inaccurate compared to the majority of the data points that you have. So it represents one middle data point, but it doesn't represent everything. So for all of you that are running, talent acquisition organizations, what I showed you there may be true or it may not be true. But what I did give you is a construct about how to evaluate whether or not recruiting in your organization is becoming more expensive or is becoming more affordable, and what you need to do, which is to look at apply rate, which is to look at what you're paying, and to calculate your cost per application so that you can build your own model. But let's, for argument's sake, say that I'm right. The averages aren't lying, that for the majority of us, recruiting is as hard and as expensive as it was, before COVID. It kind of begs the question of, well, what do we do? What do we do? I mean, none of us can go and solve, the pandemic, and clearly based on the public policy response that we're seeing in all the different countries around the world, I mean, there's nobody can seemingly agree on a bunch of things to do. You're seeing different public policy approaches and lots of different, from a lot of different countries. So how can we practically, as talent acquisition professionals, ensure that with most likely what it is going to be limited budgets, because the chief executives are going to be reading the Wall Street Journal and the FT and saying that it should be less expensive to recruit than more expensive to recruit, how can we make sure we get our jobs done? And that's what I want to talk about today. And the way I'm going to talk about it is, next slide, Lauren, talking about a toaster. So, of course, any great recruitment technology conversation needs to have a toaster. And so I'm going to ask you guys a question, and sadly, I didn't set this up well enough, but I'm just answering your head. Is it easier if you were all of a sudden Dominus Ominous, the head of global toaster sales at Amazon? Okay, so this is a big promotion working directly for Jeff, taking care of toasters. Will you sell more toasters if the people that go to Amazon can buy a toaster this way? Lauren, next slide. Or this way, next slide. Let's go back to the first one. All right, hit one button, buy it, it shows up the next day. Or you have to fill out a big long stinking form, then throw in your credit card number, then hit go. And we all know the answer to this. The answer is, one-click apply or one-click buy is especially, these little things, which is the definition of e-commerce today. It's also the definition of job search today, makes things way, way better. But we, as talent acquisition professionals in general, differentiate between what we do as consumers every day, which is buy stuff on Amazon, and also how we think about engaging with job seekers. So if we can go to the next slide. I'm here to share with you some data and a few very practical things that you can do today without going and buying a new applicant tracking system, without writing John and myself a check on recruitment advertising, to get more applicants into your funnel and arguably better applicants into your funnel. So what I'm about to share with you is a set of techniques that's informed by this massive 5-year study that we've done analyzing 1.2 billion job applications and the billions and billions of clicks that drove those applications. And I'm going to be talking to you about how you can analyze and think about your online application process through the same lens of somebody trying to sell a lot of toasters on Amazon. So in this data, Lauren, next slide, what we found is there are 3 things that impact what I call form friction. So friction in an e-commerce environment is you have a lot of people at the top that say, I want to buy a toaster, and they put the toaster in their shopping cart. And what happens between them saying, I want to buy this thing, and them actually buying it? They have like master's programs in MBA schools now focused just on that issue of e-commerce and optimization of the buying path. If we look at recruitment the same way, which is somebody clicks on a job at Totaljobs and starts the apply on your homegrown system, that is intent. That is them saying, yeah, I want to go work for your company, but only a small percentage of those people actually make it through to the end. The data that we've analyzed says there's 3 things that get in the way of people not completing that initial indication of intent. application length, the device they use, and the platform that they use. So let's take a look at application length. We analyzed all those applications based on the number of questions that are asked in those applications. And we see a direct correlation between the number of questions you ask and the apply rate. And again, just to define, the apply rate is what percentage of the people that click on your ads actually apply. So a higher number means that you get more applications per click than a lower number. So if you have less than 25 questions, approximately 11% of the people that click on your job ads within a 48-hour period of engaging with your job ad actually apply. If you have more than 51, it gets cut in half, literally in half. And so right there, this isn't a question of technology. This isn't a question of which site you actually buy your recruitment advertising on. This is just a question of what you've decided to put onto your application. How many questions do you ask? And it has an incredibly material impact on how many applicants you get. But the thing that impacts it is, next slide, is how long it takes to actually apply for the job. So this not only gets to the questions that you ask, but how you actually ask the questions. Is it short form? Is it multiple choice? Is it type in? Do the fields actually work? Some of this is technology, but also some of this is the decisions that you as talent acquisition leaders make about how you collect information in your process. And so if it takes less than 5 minutes to apply, it literally is you get 385% more applicants than if it takes more than 15 minutes to apply. And probably some of you are saying, what morons have, applications that take more than 15 minutes to apply? Well, at least in the United States, more than 50% of online applications at companies with more than 1,000 employees takes more than 15 minutes to complete online. Okay, so step number one to improving your applicant flow and reducing your costs in an environment where theoretically it's getting more expensive is to go and re-examine the questions that you ask in your application. And unless it is absolutely required, get rid of them. Almost every question costs you money in terms of recruitment advertising, because if you have more people applying, from fewer clicks, you can actually spend less money with Chris and Jon. And while that will make us sad, and it actually is going to be better for you. The second biggest thing is we have device is a massive game changer. So when I started in recruitment advertising, literally, it was almost immeasurable, the amount of job seeker traffic that came on one of these things. And now, depending on the site, it is close to 70%. What you can see here is the green is the application rate from desktop platforms by job function. And then you can see the conversion rate for mobile in blue. And what you can see is in most cases here, there's a massive decrease in apply rate once somebody is using a mobile phone, except in a few areas. One of them is restaurant. Why? Because restaurants know that almost 100% of their job applications come on a mobile phone. And so they had to go figure it out, and they made it short and easy to apply on a 3x5 screen. But there's still this massive delta between the two of them. Next slide. So what we've effectively done here is we've paved the GOAT path, which is, again, a software term where when you're writing software and you want to improve it, you sometimes can go and refactor it and to get better, and that's the equivalent of taking an old GOAT path and putting some pavement on it. But sometimes the best and fastest and most efficient thing is to abandon the path that you're on, and the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, and to bring in the most environmentally friendly way possible a bulldozer and build a super highway versus paving this old-fashioned GOAT path. And so there's what we've done is we took the paper application that asked all this information up front and said, when the internet came along, oh, this is a great idea, let's just move it online and then we're going to have it in a database. But we didn't actually rethink the application process. We didn't say, did we change this based on the idea that we want to cast a wider net rather than a shallower net to get people, great people, to join our organization. And then we didn't even think even harder about how we need to change our application process for a mobile phone. And so, what we have today is very similar to the paper application that you'd have to fill out at Luke Air Force Base in 1970, the day that I was born. Now it just happens to be online, and it's costing literally billions of dollars globally to employers because they've got an online application process that is almost from the beginning designed to make people abandon the process. So how do you fix it? Number one, next slide. That's right. The way to fix it is you create a better candidate experience. And the awesome thing is, in the process, it saves you money. So I'm going to rip through this pretty quickly because we got to get to we got to get to Lee. But next slide, please. So one of the things that is really, really important is to get serious about mobile. What you see here is a bit of math that basically says if you're paying 50 cents per every time a job seeker looks at one of your job ads, which is a little bit low, but that's about what it costs if you want to take what you spend at Total Jobs and divide it by the number of views that you get, or if you are on Indeed and you're paying per click. And then if you divide that by the conversion rate, the apply rate, if you have a best-in-class apply rate, which is what you see in restaurants, an application costs you $3.85 or £3.85 or £3.85. But if you have what the average apply rate is, it's 2%. That means it's £25 per apply. The only difference between those, you're paying the same amount for the job ad, is candidly whether or not you can fill out the form online, and next slide, how long it actually is, because there's also a correlation between how long it is. Oh, we missed a slide earlier. The other thing to do, and we already talked about this, is you go through and figure out how you can shorten your application process. But the last thing, and my friends in the applicant tracking space probably aren't going to be horribly happy with me, is if in fact you are thinking about your applicant tracking approach, utilizing either, if you're sole sourced with, let's say, Total Jobs, using the Total Jobs platform, which is integrated into the job postings so that it's really easy for people to apply, or if you're using a third-party application, is you need to actually evaluate your applicant tracking system from the perspective of its apply rate. This is on the left-hand side, you see the worst 7 applicant tracking systems in the world for apply rate. And then on the right-hand side, you see the best, 6 or 7 in the world. And what you can see here is if you compare the best and the worst, literally your applications cost close to 400% less if you choose the best-in-class applicant tracking system versus the worst. And what's interesting is that most talent acquisition organizations don't evaluate applicant tracking systems for this metric. They evaluate whether or not it integrates with a background check vendor, or whether or not it's got a nice hiring manager portal, or whether or not it's got good integration with Outlook, all of which are important. But literally, if you make the right applicant tracking decision, you can pay for the entire applicant tracking system just by having a better apply rate. And so the bottom line here is that whether it's reducing your online application, whether it's making sure it's mobile compliant, or you choose the right applicant tracking system, there are things that you can do unrelated to COVID. This is just blocking and tackling, best-in-class thought leadership, kind of tactical stuff that you as talent acquisition folks can do to dramatically bend the cost curve of recruitment advertising. Now, I have a very quick story, which Jon promised his kids that I would tell. So if we can go to the next slide. Some of you on this call are saying, Chris, you're a knucklehead. I don't want more applicants. Okay, I got applicants coming out of my ears right now. You're telling me that what I want to do is I want to make it easier for people to apply, and that's going to reduce my recruitment advertising costs. And the answer to that, I think, factually is correct. But let's deal with this one issue of making it easy for job seekers to apply isn't something that is really valuable for me. So I'm making the cost argument, but I actually think as a business owner, the most important argument is what I call the beet farmer theorem, okay? Or to use the UK version, the beetroot farmer theorem. And that is this, is that organizations today only succeed because you hire game-changing people. And if our online applications are too long and too onerous, we are going to miss the best talent. So imagine this, everybody, in my opinion, has days that I call beet farmer days. And that is on your way home from work, you call your wife, your husband, your friend, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your mother, your father, your kids, whoever, and say some iteration of this. That's it, I'm done. That place is a clown show. I'm never going back. And we all have days like that. But now I want you to envision what happens next after that venting, at least if it's somewhat similar to the Forman household. I drive home and we have 4 kids and cows and sheep and pigs and chickens, and life is cacophonous. And I have about 20 minutes to get dinner on the table before my wife gets home from work, or the cows need to be milked and the wheels come off. And so I start cooking pasta. I get the water boiling, I throw the pasta in, it's there, I got 9 minutes. Pour myself a glass of wine. And let's not make it about me. Let's say that this is some game-changing, awesome Lauren, who organized John and myself and to do this call. Got sick of John and said, that's it, I'm out. I just got to go find something else to do. And so Lauren's got a nice glass of wine, she's cooking pasta, and she's like, you know what, I'm going to go see what's out there. Tick, 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 tick. And she goes on her phone and just so happens to discover on Totaljobs the perfect job for her. Shorter commute, awesome company, free bagels on Friday, doing something really challenging. Tick, 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 tick. And, then all of a sudden, she's got 2 minutes left before the pasta is done. And one of two things happens. Either she applies or she doesn't apply. Because when the dinger goes off, we all go back to work. We got to take care of our families. We get up the next morning and the world is always better in the morning. So Lauren gets in her car, gets on the tube and starts going to work, bluefin. And one of two things happens. Either she gets to work and puts her shoulder into it, for another day, and the day is better and we lose that opportunity to talk to her authentically, or her phone rings and it's a recruiter at the company where she was able to apply in 2 minutes before dinner was ready. And that at that point in time, that recruiter has the opportunity to bring Lauren into that organization. And Lauren's got the skills to change the game for that company. And so, the emotional argument I want to make to you is that our job is not only to hire people, but to hire great people. And the way to do that is to make it as easy as possible for the best talent in the world when they're having a beetroot farmer day, where they would much rather, quit and, become a beetroot farmer than go back to that clown show, that we have the opportunity to recruit that person. So that's my story and my pitch. So with that, I think we have our 15 minutes for Lee.
Yes, Chris, thank you very much for that data-led insight. It's fantastic to see that. And I think you boiled it up into some quite practical hints and tips as well that hopefully people can take away and think about. And clearly getting beetroot into the story pleases me and my children, because we've been trying to grow it for 2 months now. So I said Daddy was going to work to talk about beetroot today. So thanks for doing that. I wanted to bring Lee Barratt, as I mentioned earlier, into the conversation now. I think Lee brings with him a wealth of experience and recent experience around Ageas' own candidate flow, ATS onboarding, and those sorts of things. So welcome, Lee. I believe I can see quite a few questions pop up, Lee, on the way through here. And Lauren's going to kindly pose some, not only to you, don't worry, Chris and I will chip in as and when we can, but you're the subject matter expert here in a practical term, so over to you.
Great, so we'll start with you, Lee. What were the challenges you faced in the recruitment process and what did you change to overcome these?
Okay. Well, good afternoon all. So as Jon said, I am the recruitment manager for Ageas. The challenges I've faced in the recruitment process. So I think the main one, when I joined the team there, we had an issues where hiring managers were contacting agencies direct. We had a end-to-end process that wasn't performing. I think following on from Chris' slides, we had a lot of issues with candidate fallout, and that was due to the process. We also had recruitment being looked after by HR advisors, so they weren't particularly invested in the recruitment side of things. We had a 40% direct fill rate, which was quite low, and therefore cost on recruitment was for not going through the roof and wasn't being monitored either. We also didn't have a preferred supply list, so as I said, managers were going to agencies ad hoc. It was very, very costly. And also we couldn't estimate any kind of demand within the organisation. I think recruitment was kind of a secondary operational team, whereas I think it should be forefront, it should be strategic, because after all, if you have 4 or 5 hires that suddenly have to go to agencies that you weren't predicting, that could be a cost of £100,000 suddenly on your budget. And when my budget's only 500,000, then that's a fifth of my budget within a month that could just be on there without predicting it. So yeah, so that was probably some of the challenges that I faced. So we did do a full end-to-end review, and Chris, unfortunately I didn't get to see your slides before, Chris, but it does fall quite nicely into answering this question in terms of when we did do the full end-to-end, we did have people testing the application process, and we did have over 51 questions in our process. So it did fall quite nicely into what I was maybe saying around that. And we have now did reduce that to just the necessity question. We went through each individual question, as you said, and if it wasn't needed for screening a candidate, it wasn't asked.
That's great.
With us being financial services, we have to ask certain questions around debt and criminal convictions, so they have to stay. But any question that wasn't needed to screen a candidate was taken out. That did mean, though, that we had to act fast with candidates, and we had to build a bigger team in order to deal with the more applications that were coming in, because obviously time's a killer. The longer you leave an application, the more chance they're going to have other applications and obviously other jobs. So reviewing the application the full end-to-end onboarding process, that was key. We also had a lot of people dropping out in the first 6 months, so ensuring our adverts matched what the managers were saying in terms of the interviews and what they experienced when they first joined. That needed a lot of joining up as well. So that was one of the other key focuses that we had at the start about 2 or 3 years ago. So in order to fix that, we built a strong team of recruiters, and I chose to have a mixture of agency recruiters as well as people from the business internally, and that gave us a nice balance of recruiters that were used to recruiting direct, but also people from the business who understood the business areas within it. We also so we built a model around four recruiters with the ability to flex it up and down depending on the numbers. Because we have call centres, we're very much peak and troughs. We do have motor insurance as well, which obviously peaks in March, peaks in August, in line with the number plates. So we needed to make sure that the team could flex in line with the business requirements. The other thing that was we had to look at quite significantly is the agency spend and the spend on job boards. The job board spend was really ad hoc. We were buying an advert at a time. We didn't really look at bulk buying of job board ads, and therefore didn't really benefit from economies of scale or anything like that. So that was another thing, another way that we overcome those challenges. So by the end of year 1, we'd moved from 40% to 50%. Not a great achievement, but obviously moved in the right direction. It was only then when we started focus properly on individual applications for individual roles, looking at those roles that always tended to be filled with adverts, so we could leave those alone. but the roles that were filled, the more difficult roles to fill, the roles that only had a certain few number of applications that took longer to fill, and those are the ones we focused on. And by doing that, we actually increased the direct percentage then from 50% in year 1 to 84% in the second year. And the cost per hire was around £620 per hire for 641 hires. So so that's pretty much the challenges that we faced and how we overcame them at the start. There's lots of other ones obviously as well, but as we've only got 15 minutes, I couldn't really go into them. Can't really go into them.
So Lee, a little bit of context, the fact that you had your team initially go through and actually go through the online application process, and then you set the standard of saying if it's not required for screening, then it's got, or for legal reasons take it out, is it's good common sense, but it is frightening how few people have their teams do that. But the razzle dazzle, which is really impressive based on my experience, is the correlation that you drew between churn, kind of first year churn, and what you were advertising in the job and what the hiring managers were actually talking to candidates about. Is, I mean, we could spend a day talking about that, and that is so incredibly important. Once you get the blocking and tackling down, which is to make sure it's efficient, to make sure that you negotiate everything right and you got your funnels plumbed right and everything's working, that's where you can absolutely bend the cost curve, because it's I was given a talk about this about 6 months ago, and I had my toaster slide out, and we started kind of in the group talking about, people thought they were buying a toaster, but if all of a sudden, a snowmobile showed up or a Cuisinart, it may be the best thing ever, but it's not what they wanted. They wanted a freaking toaster. And so making sure that the ad matches what the reality is 100%. That's just great. And those results are amazing. That's awesome, man. Congratulations.
I think what also helped us is just strategically, we looked at the first 6 months. If somebody left within those 6 months, we found, or we took it as that was the recruitment problem rather than a business problem. If it's the first, after the 6 months, after probation, then it's not our fault. We've given you what you wanted in the first place. It's up to you to keep them. But in that first 6 months, we just treated it as it was a direct responsibility of the recruitment team to keep people longer than the probation period, and that was through the whole end-to-end process.
Do you have someone on your team, Lee, that thinks about these types of longitudinal issues? From this is kind of recruitment marketing, strategy type stuff. Is that your role, or do you have a recruitment marketer that works for you, or is this something that you've got people that split it up and do it over a beer at night and kind of it's their side work?
So I wish I could have the budget for a marketeer. That would be excellent. But no, I think this has all been developed internally. So we've gone from me doing it and then me upskilling the team. And we therefore now have, instead of me doing and looking at this for every job board, we've split it up into the different job boards and have an account manager for each one who looks on a weekly basis. So they're literally looking at the clicks, the pay-per-clicks every week, looking at the SEO to ensure that we're getting the right applications coming through. And if not, then moving those. So if we need to put more budget into a certain role because it's not performing, they can look at it literally on a week-to-week basis, where before you'd be looking at almost quarterly, if not annually, on what happened the previous 12 months rather than looking at what happened last week.
What has COVID done for your funnels? Has it tightened them up? Has it opened them up?
So actually, looking at your slides again, both of your slides at the beginning and throughout the presentation, our application looks exactly identical to those two slides, the teeth slides and your slide, Chris. We had a period of time where obviously we stopped recruiting at the uncertainty period. So probably that was March, April time. We completely stopped, and there was a couple of live roles that we still kept going, but generally speaking, we stopped. But then after that, we started looking at recruiting. I think as an example, we recruited. Normally we have we recruit in pods, so pods of 14.
Yep.
Normally that would take around 2 months. It took 14 working days from the day the advert went live to the final interview and the final offer being made. The quality of candidates were coming through were excellent. I totally agree with the fact that people are looking at jobs and not necessarily applying for everyone, but I think because there's so much choice out there, we're getting candidates from industries that for our call center, for example, we regularly recruit people from care industry, hospitality, but we're getting people from all different industries now that are just looking at the ads to see if it's something that would match their skills as well.
Interesting.
We've had a great question come through for all of you. If we could start with you, Lee, on this one, as you've kind of gone through it yourself. Why do you think it's often difficult for businesses to implement and accept change?
Because they don't want to. They don't like change. Well, I think from a recruitment, I'll answer it from a recruitment perspective rather than a business, and leave the business guys, Chris and John, to answer that part. But from a recruitment perspective, I think it's around control. So when if managers, so before we came along, managers did have freedom to go out to an agency whenever they wanted, agree terms with those agencies, pay whatever the agencies wanted, and they felt that they had control throughout the process. They could interview who they want, they could see all of the CVs that came through, but it's just not sustainable, especially if they've got lots of applications coming through. And that's I think it was difficult trying to change people's opinion, opinion and their normal processes. They would have relationships with agencies, for example. So the fact that we're now promoting direct recruitment meant to them that they couldn't use agencies anymore, but that wasn't the case. We'd always need agencies to help us with some of the more difficult roles. And it was about communicating that to the managers. I think managers fear when a internal recruitment team comes in that they're going to lose control, whereas my ethos has always been it's still their process, we're just making it easier for them. And I think that was how we communicated the new team when we launched the new team. And I think we've made really good inroads with the business in many areas. There's still areas that still feel like that, I'm sure, even after 3 years. But I think the whole communication piece, the fact that we're delivering against what we said in those communication pieces, has meant the managers have accepted that change.
For me, you know, what Lee was describing is spot on. You know, if I abstract it a little bit, for me as both somebody that thinks about it through the talent acquisition lens, but also just an entrepreneur and a business person, change is difficult when there is a mismatch between personal and organizational interests. Okay, so like we're talking about the use of agency, right, versus using it internally. The personal interest of the hiring manager is, I've got my friends who are in the agency world, they are responsive to me, maybe they take me out to dinner, I like going out to dinner, I like the fact that if I send them a text message at 10 o'clock at night on a Saturday, they will respond to me. That is, I like this, and I've got the money in the budget, I don't really care. The organizational side of this is, hey, agencies are great for certain things, but we can drive a lot of OpEx lift, and perhaps do a better job if we do it ourselves. And if we believe that talent is the core of our business, this needs to be a core competency for us, and so it makes sense for us to do that internally. That is a mismatch between personal and organizational. If in fact what is good for me is also good for the organization, I find that people are very willing to change. It's just when there's a bit of a mismatch that's typically the hurdle that gets in the way. But I also have gray hair and just turned 50, so as my kids told me, I'm becoming that angry old guy that sits outside in a lawn chair and yells at people to get off his lawn. So who knows? Maybe I'm just being grumpy.
I think just to shortcut it, my answer to that question around risk versus reward. Some individuals and companies are more adverse to taking those steps, given the backdrop and the environment. Now's a good time to take that risk, I believe. You know, now's a good time to look at your ATS supplier, look at your job board provider, take a risk, see if you can create more value for your organisation. So that's just my part quickly. Listen, we're out of time, guys. I really appreciate both Chris and Lee joining today, and obviously all of you for attending. As I said, we had over 130 people tune into this, which is fantastic. As I said, we'll be following up with a recording and slides, etc. Thank you for your questions. We'll come back to you offline on the ones we've not managed to answer. So yeah, appreciate your time and look out for the next one.
Yeah, thanks Lee, thanks John, thanks Lauren. Goodbye everybody. Be good.